All right.
Welcome to episode number 13 of Relationships Over Reps with coaches Johnny Parker and Coach Rich Lansky. We are recording this on Saturday, August 22nd, 2026. And today's topic is going to deal with being part of a team and taking an authentic approach to being part of a team, whether you are the leader of the team or whether you are an assistant or whether you are the low man or woman on the totem pole. Coach, how are you doing today?
Coach, I'm doing great. Thank you. Good to hear your voice.
It's always good to hear your voice. It's probably a little less painful. Last week I was there in Cleveland with you in person, so you had to look at my face. So this is a little less painful than listening to my voice, huh?
I'm not touching that one.
There you go. Self-deprecating humor is a specialty. So, Coach, let's look at this scenario. You have been a head strength and conditioning coach at the Division III collegiate level. You have run a great program. Your teams have done well, and you have now made the jump, and you're going to a Division I Power 5 school, but you're no longer the head. You are now the new guy or the new girl. How do you approach that after being the one who made all the decisions to now being part of the team where maybe you're just offering decisions or offering options for decisions?
Coach, I think you have to get a feeling of whether your opinion will be valued or not. If it's not valued, then you just um, slave away at whatever the boss tells you to do, but you treat it as though it were your own idea. You can't just tell another staff member or athletes, well, when I did it, we did it this way. That is defeating the whole purpose of having you there. So, but if your opinion is valued, I wouldn't speak up in front of a group if you have a disagreement with the head coach, unless he has a very strong uh, self, I don't know what the word is, a strong self of identity. And I don't even think that's a correct phrase, but as he's comfortable in his own skin, how about that? And
I like that.
is very confident in what they're doing. So I think first you have to get the feel of where you stand. You standing on the concrete or you standing in quicksand?
Well, I think that's a good idea to think about. But I would say if your opinion is not valued, you probably may have made a mistake in accepting that position. Maybe you were chasing the logo on the shirt as opposed to chasing the opportunity for you to flourish and use your skills in the best way to help your athletes achieve their best. What do you think, Coach?
Coach, that is undoubtedly true. And Coach, they weren't trying to do you a favor by hiring you. They're trying to do themselves a favor. So they're using you. I don't mean that in a uh, crude or negative way, but it's true. They're using you. So, coach, it's only fair that you use them. So learn as much as you can about the differences between coaching in Power 5 versus Division III, and, and then gradually adapt to those differences. But coach, you as a new man, you're probably considered the low man on the totem pole. If you can stand that feeling, then throw yourself wholeheartedly into the job and you're there to please the boss. And you can do that by helping his players the most.
I agree. It lends me back to something we've talked about in the past, the self-determination theory that was in the literature of sports psychology and motivation um, by DC and Ryan. And two of the aspects of self-determination theory have to do with um, feeling valued that and being able to, like, your opinion matters, as well as developing a sense of autonomy and mastery of your craft. And I think if the staff runs according to that, where your opinion is valued, might not always be accepted, might not always be agreed with, but it's valued. They want to hear what you have to say and what your opinion is and what your feedback or suggestions are. And then you're contributing, and then you're working in a partnership. And I think in true authentic coaching, whether we're working with our athletes or our coaches, it has to be a partnership. Now, in a partnership, there's usually an alpha and a beta, sometimes an omega. But there's a leader, and if the leader decides that your opinion is not what's needed at that time, you go along with that and you agree with that. And you can disagree in private, but you always are on the same page in public to the athletes. Wouldn't you say that's important?
That's not important. That's vital. That is beyond important. There has to be one voice coming out of that coach's office, and it has to be his voice, the leader's voice. And your job is to support his vision of the way this thing ought to look.
Sure, because technically our sports performance team, whether it's strength and conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, sports psychologists, massage therapists, nutritionists, whatever it is, but our team has to function like a team if we want to model what our athletes' team should look like. I mean, imagine if every athlete decided that they were going to do their own thing on Friday night or on Saturday night or on Sunday afternoon. Linebacker's going to call his own play. He's told to crash off the edge, but he decides he's going A gap and moving around. Imagine if everybody did their own thing. We wouldn't be very successful, would we?
Not at all. Yeah, you'd be real successful in getting the other team's strength coach or promotion.
Yeah,
Because
I believe that.
you could not win without one voice, one way of doing things. If that's not your way, tough. You know, you were looking for a job. When you got that one, then start looking again. But give the boss a chance to see that your ideas do have validity. So try to figure out something that he couldn't possibly say no to. And do that. If he lets you, he tells you to run with it, do that to the best of your ability. And when he sees how well that's working, he might ask your opinion on something else that's a little more complex or a little more to the issue at hand. So take small victories, and they keep adding up and adding up until they're major victories.
And I think it's important too. A couple of things we talked about before. When we had Coach Boyle on, before we talked about role models, and a team can be a role model as well as an individual. But we also talked earlier about advice for young coaches or new coaches, that it's important to leave your ego at the door. In fact, if I'm the guy coming in and I am an assistant, and I like doing it this way, I like setting up for the clean this way and teaching it from the top down. And the philosophy of the staff has always been from the floor up. Well, I'm going to have to adapt, because if I don't, then because my ego's not letting me, I am now creating a schism, or I'm creating a dysfunctional relationship. And the athletes are going to pick up on that. And they're going to be like, well, the new guy doesn't agree. Maybe the new guy is right. Maybe our other guy is wrong. And then all of a sudden we have doubt. I mean, when you have to hear one voice, it's really important, whether you're in a meeting room, whether you're in business, whether you're in the military, whether you're in a sports team, there has to be one voice, because confusion is one of the worst things that can happen in any organization. Coach?
So I agree. I agree. And coach, so you have taught cleans from the top down. This new school, they teach it from the ground up. Coach, what's so bad about learning a new way? Huh? What did that
More than
destroy
one way to
your
skin a cat,
career?
right?
Yes, sir. And you still might not, uh, when you're out on your own again, you still might like your way better. Then do it your way. But there's no harm in learning a new way.
I agree. And, sometimes I talked about one of the things in a presentation I did for the NHSSCA at the Florida State Clinic last year, talked about lessons learned over 4 decades of coaching. And one of them is in the beginning, learn a little about a lot of things, right? And then when you find out what your passion is, what you're good at, where your talents are, where your strengths are, maximize them by learning a lot about a few things and finding other people on your team that fill in the gaps and can help. So if I'm really good with platform lifts, but I'm not really great with, let's say, a conjugate approach, I want to find somebody with experience with a conjugate approach. Or if speed development might not be my forte, I want to get somebody on staff I work with who's really good at teaching acceleration and good mechanics. Um, and I'm sure we've all been in situations like that. Have you been in situations like that, Coach?
Coach, I have. And well, I take that back. I really hadn't because I did it by myself for 90 something percent of my career. But um, I have been in situations like that short term, and I changed them by changing my mailing address.
I gotcha. But
So,
unfortunately, that's not always a possibility because sometimes our mailing address is not as easy to change because we've got kids in school, people depending on us, some bills. It's tough. Not every strength and conditioning coach is at a point in their career where they can afford to jump ship or to look for the next pasture. And they're going to have to try to dig deep, get some more fertilizer out of that wheelbarrow and fertilize where they are and figure out a way to make things grow there.
Coach, there's a saying that means a lot to me, and that is bloom where you are planted.
I like it.
Coach, you can't plant, let's say, azaleas in your front yard and expect them to bloom in your backyard.
That is true. So if you got your eyes always looking in the backyard, how are you going to take care of your front yard and how are you going to let that flourish? And
Yeah,
our athletes are the ones who are going to suffer if our eyes and our attention are not on them. Because again, as you've always said, we hold their dreams in our hands. And how good are we at helping them achieve our dreams if we're worried about finding the next person to help with their dreams or a different
very
person?
true, Coach. Very true. So, Coach, those things will all work out if I think the key is leaving your ego at the front door.
I like it. Hey, so Coach Parker, circling back to the importance of everybody having one voice and, you know, making sure that we are taking care of the area that we're at. So as like fertilizing where we're at, not looking for the playing field. You talked about the blooming azaleas. I think you talked about in the front yard and the backyard. Let's look at a scenario that's a little different than you going from being the head guy at a smaller school to being part of the team at a larger school. Let's go the opposite way. Let's say you're a head guy that, because of a change in the head coach and the coaching staff, because of whatever reason, maybe there was a change in ownership. Um, Now you are going to be an assistant at a team on the same level. Let's say you could say the pros or D1 or whatever it is. So you're making a lateral move, but you're going from being the head guy to the assistant because you find yourself out of work. I think that's going to be a real good challenge for a lot of people when you're used to making these decisions as opposed to offering options for decisions. Do you know anybody that's been in that situation with all your years in the league?
I do.
How did they handle that?
Coach, they handled it just the way that I think that hopefully I would have handled it or that you would have, that they subjugated themselves to the will and to the dictates of the guy they were working for and supported him in every way possible. You're used to getting supported. Well, do the same thing for your new boss or for your boss. You know, you've been on your own for a while. Any boss would be new. So um, subjugate your will to his, support his way of doing things, and you can disagree in his office, but when you come out of that office, it has to be your idea. You have to support it so strongly that anybody on the outside looking in would think that was your idea.
Yeah, get on board or get overboard, right?
Hadn't heard that. I like that.
I got another one for you. How's this look like? Because this is one that goes back to some of my spiritual beliefs too. Instead of being resentful for the situation you find yourself in, find the blessing in it and be thankful that you have a position now after you lost the position. Be thankful that you have an opportunity to be a servant as when you were a leader before, because that's your calling at that time. And you're going to be the best servant possible. You're going to be the best number two guy or number two girl in that room and on that floor and on that field. I mean, whatever you do, I mean, it tells us in the Bible, whatever you do it with energy, with vigor, and 100% of your talents. Anything more is a waste of the talents that you've been given. Anything more is a waste of those coaching abilities and that ability to establish relationships, or that ability to get guys faster, or that ability to get guys stronger. It's a waste if we're not giving 100% when we do it. Because that athlete whose dreams we hold in their hand, they don't care where you came from. They just know that you're the guy helping them now. What do you think, Coach?
I think you're exactly right. Coach, you have, when something bad happens, it's best not to concentrate on what you've lost, but on what you have left,
I
and
like that.
maximize what you have left.
You know, it reminds me of the guy that loses his job and his savings in the movie, okay? And oh my God, but he still has his house and he still has his skills so he can go out and work. You know, you can dwell on the negative aspect of what happened, or you can focus on the positive and the fact that you have an opportunity to regain, reclaim, or improve your condition, your standings, your situation, whatever it might be. You know, I think great coaches, great teachers, great leaders, great officers, they all focus on the positive, not the negative.
Coach, when you mine for gold, you have to go through tons of dirt to find an ounce of gold. But if you look for the dirt, you'll never see the gold.
I gotcha. And in the same way, you know, we have hills and valleys. And I don't think you appreciate the hills or the mountains that you're on until you spend some time in the valley or the ditches.
That's probably true. I will say this, though, about winning and losing is that I learned all that I know about losing and all that I needed to know about losing the first game I ever lost.
Yep. Well, you realize
Unfortunately,
it's
I've had
not a
plenty
place
of
you want to be,
refresher
right?
courses. I've had plenty of refresher courses since that first one, but I didn't learn anything new except I was made me even more determined not to lose again.
Right. But you recognize the negative aspect that you didn't like being there. So then you took all the effort that you could and all the work that you could put into not being there again. If it was with whatever contribution you would make, because one of the things I think we forget is we are just a. I think you said you were a grain in the sand on the beach of those great Giants teams. In your very humble opinion, I think you did a little bit more than that. But we do have to remember we are just one part of the picture, because on Friday nights, in my sake, or on Saturdays in college, or on Sundays in the NFL, we're not calling the plays. We're not out there on the field trying to execute the plays. We're there to support, and we're there to prepare their bodies and their minds so that they can perform on those days. But we're just one small part of that. And I think people lose sight of that sometimes. They're like, "Well, my team did this, or I did this, or I made that guy." No, you did not. You just contributed to helping that person achieve their dreams or their goals. You didn't make anybody. You know, I think Albert Meal said that one time. He said, "You didn't make somebody; his parents made
Coach, I'll tell tell you this, I've heard this, not frequently, thank goodness, but heard a coach talk about how they inflicted a bodily beating on a certain other opponent. Boy, we beat them up one side and down the other physically. They were toting them out in body bags. And what's the final score, Coach? Well, they beat us 58-3, but it was no contest.
And what was
Some
your
people
reaction to that?
to move on to the next whoever else I could
Right.
go listen to.
Somebody
Knew
else, right?
knew that guy. Yes, I knew that guy had no clue about what competition was really like.
I remember somebody I was at a conference. This must have been a good decade ago, and they said something similar. And they said something like, "Well, we should have done this or we should have done that." And I looked at him and said, "You're welcome to put a helmet on and go out there and try,
Yeah.
because you got to know your place. You got to know your place in the wheel on the wheel. You got to know what spoke you are. You got to know if you're toward the center of the wheel or the perimeter. And on certain times, like in the off season, you're toward the center. But on game day, you're probably more toward the perimeter. And you got to know your space, what your role is, what your responsibilities are, and then you have to do them to the very best of your ability and what you've been asked to do."
Coach, all of this is just a lot of talk for leave your ego at the door. Be what the job calls for you to be. If it calls for you to be a leader, then lead. If it calls for you to be a follower, then follow. It's that simple. Might not be simple to do, but the concept is very simple to grasp.
I was in a similar situation back when I was at Braden River 4 years, and I came back to Manatee. And when I came back to Manatee, there was already somebody handling the strength and conditioning for the team, and he was a friend of mine, and we get along great. And I consider him, a brother in iron, a brother in Christ. And but we had some different ideas, and we would sit down, go over them. But most of the time, his idea is what he wanted to go with, and that's his prerogative. But I made sure I was at when it came down to when we walked into first period and we were doing certain exercises and certain reps, it came down to I was approaching that program design as if I came up with the idea. If it was my program, as opposed to coaches, because I owed it to him, and I owed it to him loyalty wise. I owed it to the kids that they were getting one message, one voice.
Yeah, you owe it to the kids, and you express that loyalty to the kids through your loyalty to your boss.
Yep. So it was a good experience for me. It really was. I mean, and people are like, "Well, don't you want to be in charge?" I said, "I'll be in charge at some point. But being in charge isn't always the best thing either. You don't want to be in charge of a bad situation. I mean, if I can work with somebody and create a good situation, I think that's better than being the guy, because it makes the newspapers or the social media and not having a good situation, not helping our athletes achieve their goals or their dreams." So, coach,
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
you came in my weight room, and you have come in my weight room in the past, I know it's a while ago, I sure as heck am going to allow you to tell a kid something different than I told him, if you think it's going to make them better, because I owe it to that kid.
Okay, Coach, the way I would do that is, though, I would ask you, don't you think it would be better if the kid were taught to do it this way? I wouldn't go to the kid first.
No,
I'd
I
never
understand
do
that.
that.
You always know your place. I understand that. That's just a matter of good etiquette, you know. Just like so when I was doing the USAW courses, because I've been teaching those certification courses for 26 years now, and uh, probably in the first 10 years, a lot of them were based at universities. And I love being around strength and conditioning. So I would go early on the Friday, and I go watch training on Friday a lot of times. And there'd be things that I saw that I might say, I wonder why they do it that way. But I would ask the coach, And these were things that had to do with weightlifting exercise. I'm not about to second guess somebody on how many 110s they're running, or what they're doing as far as some of the specific things that they did in the weight room that were um, solely attributable to their program themselves. But I would say, hey, in RDLs, I would notice that they're bending a lot at the waist and not so much pushing the hips back. So I would just take a note, and then in private, when one of the coaches would be taking the course during lunch, I just mentioned, hey, I was watching training. Is there a reason that you have them doing this? And a lot of times, there's a reason that they do those things that you never thought of, as opposed to just jumping in and saying, hey, you got to move your hips back. You're doing it wrong. That's the wrong way to go about things. So
Very
I
true.
agree with that. You find out why, because sometimes they're approaching something from a totally different perspective that you have no idea what they're doing. It's kind of like looking at videos on YouTube of training, and you see these highlight training films, I call them, and you're like, I wonder why they're doing that. That doesn't make any sense. But we have no idea why they're doing it, at what stage of the program they're doing it at, what came before, what came after, what the context is, and what the goal is. I mean, so just making commentary like that, I call that's like the Monday morning armchair quarterback version of a strength coach. I'm sure you've been in that position before.
Exactly.
So, coach, I think that is really important. You had talked about that you have been in a situation like that where you saw something that you questioned why they were doing it, and you wanted to bring it up to the coach. So, how did you approach that, bringing it up to the coach that you were watching?
It all depends, coach, on whether I thought that coach was genuinely interested in my opinion or not. And if he's just, hey, here's what we do, uh, like it or leave it, or I don't care what you think. You can read that, whether they care about what you think or not.
Right.
And so, but coach, I gotta say this. There's a school that I guarantee you'll know who it was, that when they would do a clean or any of that, they would jump, which that's fine, but they would show their whole foot to you if you were behind them.
Oh, so they bend their knee?
But coach, not only that, when they would jump, they would bring their feet up so that you would see their whole foot from if you were standing behind them.
So,
And
like what they call the old donkey stomp?
yeah, I guess, coach.
Yeah. And then their
Uh,
chest was going forward and the bar was out front, right?
yeah, because that's the way they did it, light, heavy, whatever. And I just thought, God, what are you doing this for? Why are you doing it? And I didn't make any corrections until our program started. And I had a couple of those kids in our program, and we changed that real quick.
Gotcha. So, sometimes I think when we talked about leave your ego at the door, sometimes you got to put your ego aside if you're the guy in the room before you come in the door, and you have to be open to other people's ideas. I think when you put up a wall, you put up that wall, and that wall says, I do it this way. This is the way I've always done it. This is the way I believe in. I don't want to hear your opinion. I don't want to hear your suggestion, because this is what I'm going to go with. This is the girl that I brought to the dance. I'm going to dance every dance with her, which is very common. And I understand some people feel comfortable in that. They're very comfortable in what they do and they don't want to hear anything new. But I think you do a disservice, not just to yourself and learning some new things, but disservice to the athletes that have trusted you to help them achieve their dreams. Because there may be something out there that you didn't think of, or it makes you think of something in a different way, that all of a sudden you're like, hey, maybe I'll incorporate this, and this may help my athletes get a little more powerful. This may help my athletes be a little bit more explosive. You know,
Absolutely. Absolutely, coach. But again, I'd say go to the coach first. If you're a visitor, you see something that you just know is not correct, and that it seems to be universal in that room, go to the coach first, and then if he has several options, he can blow you off. He can tell you to go pound sand, or he can be genuinely interested in how you teach it. And he might give you some players to coach. Here, take these two guys.
Kind of like you did with Coach Boyle that day that you told us about.
Coach, next topic.
All right. So one of the things that I think is important for us to remind coaches or suggest, because it's our way is not the perfect way. Okay. But one of the things that we can suggest to coaches is have an open mind. Since you do have 2 ears, maybe listen twice as much as you talk, and then make your own decisions with the information you have at hand. Who would want to make a decision if they don't have all of the different options in front of them? It's that could be not just ego, but that could be stubbornness. So I think it's important that a little humility may go a long way, and
Coach,
understand that if somebody's coming to you with suggestions or questions, it's because they actually care and want to learn why you're doing something, and maybe they are going to pick something up, or maybe they're going to make a suggestion that might help you. It's kind of like when you said go to the coaches first. I think that's important because I don't go to somebody's house for dinner and they serve me the same meal that, let's say, my wife makes all the time. I said, my wife makes this better. She does this. Why don't you do this? That's not the way to approach it.
no.
Not if you
You'd be
want another
approaching
invite
that
back.
front door with uh, stuff all over your face, and
Yeah, a
um,
different way was, wow, that's a little different than I'm used to. What do you do to get that peppery taste? Or what do you do to get that heat? Bang. There, there's different ways to talk to people and to get information, to offer information.
Coach, I got to say this: you open the door, and I can't leave the door open on this. Coach, I was speaking at a conference, and I don't. Back then, I didn't go to see other college strength coaches that much, um, and Coach, I went around to 5 different coaches or little knots of people talking, and I would ask, what is one thing I could tell today to young coaches that would help them help you the most? And coach, it was not even, there was no hesitation.
Humility.
So yeah, and coach, they each one of those coaches, those 5 veteran coaches, said that the one thing I could tell or that I could say to the young coaches that would help them the most would be humility.
I like it.
Humility. Yeah.
Well, and I can tell you as a young coach, I could have used a little bit more humility. I could have. So I recognize that when I reflect on my career. And I'm glad that I found a different way. So, Coach, it is a Saturday afternoon, and I know we've got one of these scheduled for tomorrow too. So I'm not even going to let you rest for 24 hours before I dig deep into that brain of yours and pull out all kinds of great information for our listeners.
But I better put some in there if you want to try to
Don't
pull some out.
I got some good tools. I got a drill. I got a shovel. I got all kinds of stuff. We're going to dig in and get some information out of there.
All right. Coach, I think tweezers would be sufficient.
They're going to be some big tweezers. You take care of yourself, and we'll talk soon. In fact, our next guest is going to be Zach Evanesh, somebody that we both know and respect.
Coach, he is really good.
I agree. That's why we invited him on the show. So look forward to talking to you and him tomorrow. You take care of yourself, Coach. For everybody and our listeners, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your insight. We appreciate your input. And we will leave our ego at the door if you have some suggestions for us, and we will consider them and make a great decision based on that. So thank you very much for listening to Relationships Over Reps with Coach Johnny Parker and Coach Rich. God bless. Take care.